thank you for coming to this presentation of Marcel Canoy. And today, so Marcel is a good friend of mine, first of all, so thanks a lot for being here. He's a distinguished lecturer at Erasmus University, and he has a past in health economics. He's done many things, and he's written for many newspapers. He's very active in the public debate. And recently he's written a book on Rabobank.
That's right.
And, well, my first question to you would be, Marcel, why did you start to write a book about Rabobank?
Yes, that's a good question. My inspiration came from way back when I was a professor in health economics at the University of Tilburg. I realized that I was writing a lot about healthcare, but did I really know about healthcare? I mean, of course I know from reading books and from reading articles and talking to peers, and you have it. But I thought it was not enough. So I knew a guy who was a director at a hospital. It was not a good hospital, by the way, but I had a sort of personal trust relationship with this guy. And so I told him, so why don't you allow me in your hospital for a couple of days? And let me show me around, let me talk to the people, both the real healthcare that's delivered to the patients, but also management stuff or financial stuff or admin stuff. And so my purpose was, what do I learn from observing what's going on in the hospital, which has broader implications for the healthcare sector, or for healthcare in the Netherlands, or for hospital care, or for what have you. And I was wondering whether initially I thought, well, maybe I will not learn a lot because I have the arrogance or the illusion that I already know quite a bit about healthcare. That's why they decided to make me a professor in healthcare economics. And I was actually quite, well, it's a little bit of a feeling between shocked and impressed what I learned just from being in a hospital for 2 days. And the people were very happy that they could talk to me because they had the feeling that they could trust me, that I was not there to write nasty stories about that hospital. But the deal was, I could write whatever I like. There were no contracts signed by me about confidentiality, although I received confidential information because, for instance, I was there when a patient was in the operation room. Now, I'm not allowed to write about that patient, but it's ridiculous to write a contract for something that you wouldn't do anyway. Namely, say that Roy Giegegak had an operation to his ear. I mean, that's ridiculous. There's no point in writing that, but there's also no point in letting me sign a contract for something that I wouldn't do anyway. And since the director of that hospital trusts me, of course I sent them the articles. I wrote 5 articles about those 2 days, and if there was anything that sort of felt at their side that I would not satisfy the trust level that they gave me, they were, of course they could tell me. And there were some minor things that they said, well, maybe you cannot, you change a little bit this and that. That was not because they wanted to change the conclusions or the direction, but because that would have been a bit sensitive to somebody. And so I thought, okay, I'm happy to change that because I'm not there to make somebody to embarrass people. But the substance was mine, and they didn't touch that at all.
So this was healthcare, and how do you go to
okay, it's a long story, but it's very important. And I thought, if I do it for healthcare, and I did it the second time with the Ministry of Healthcare, and if I already learned quite a lot, even though I'm a specialist, I observed at the bank was a similar situation. In the banks, there were only stories in the media that how terrible they were, and that there were all crooks, and that there were scandals, and And then when the banks communicate themselves, it's all, oh, we are great. And it's marketing stories. And I thought, well, I've been at this hospital, right? And I saw that things are much more nuanced than stories that you read in the press, but they're also more nuanced than marketing stories by the practitioners themselves. So why don't I do the same thing as I did with the hospital, with the bank? Because I mean, there's a huge world, and the banks are incredibly important institutions in the world, and you don't read what's actually going on there. And I mean, we have the crisis, and it's obvious that the banks misbehaved in the years around the crisis. But nobody knows what has changed. If I ask my friends, what do you think has changed in the banking world? They say, well, pretty much nothing. That's the public perception, right? And if you ask the banks, they give you the marketing story. Oh, no, we are really good guys, and we do a lot of good things. Both don't tell you anything. So what you read in the newspapers is just only when there's something rotten, and when you listen to the banks, you get the marketing story. I thought, nah, this sector is too important to leave it there, because there's a huge world. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. Of course, I need their cooperation. And well, I don't want to take too long on this subject, but one way or the other, and it was also because I could show them that I already did this in healthcare, and that the results were that I was not after. I'm not a journalist, so I'm not after making stories about how bad banks are. I just want to see what they do and draw conclusions from them. So I went to ING, I went to ABN, and they didn't want to do it. And Rabo said, well, it's a good idea, and we want to do it. And of course, it took a long time for everybody in Rabobank to be completely convinced, because they monitored and checked me 10 times, because is this guy really trustworthy? And because they know that I have an incentive, a commercial incentive, to make the scandals a little bit bigger, because scandals sell. I'm not interested in selling, I'm interested in the substance. But, well, they really need to trust me fully on this. So I did it, and 2 years I worked maybe 2 days per week on average, and I could do everything. I went to Tanzania, I went to Australia, I went to Hong Kong, I went to the local banks, I went to Utrecht, where it's the head office. I went everywhere, and there were no contracts signed, and there were no limits. So I told the boss of the Rabobank, okay, now I want to be at your next management meeting for a whole day. And he said, you want that too? All right, it's a bit tricky, but okay, we've agreed with this deal, so here you go. You can come. And so I was there for a whole day, and they just do what they always do, leading the bank and taking decisions on whatever. And okay, there's this crazy guy there who sits there making notes and writing stories about it. So for them, I mean, you have to, whatever you think about banks or the Rabobank in general, it's a courageous step, because I am more or less known of not holding back if I think something. This gentleman over here, we've been in secondary school together. It's a total coincidence. I didn't know he would be here. Well, he will know that I'm not the type of guy who holds back when I think when I have a certain opinion. So for them to buy that deal is courageous. So
why did they do it? What was
that? That's a good question. It's always asked. They say, well, are they crazy? I mean, they're masochistic that they get this guy and then take the risk that he writes all sorts of things that nobody knows about. Well, there are 3 reasons. First of all, they consider me as a sort of free consultant, because, and of course they need to change a lot in this bank. The world is changing very, very rapidly. 2 days ago, Facebook announced that they will launch a new payment system with Libra. Now, can be a serious risk for the business model of banks, and so the whole world is changing very rapidly, and it's very difficult for a bank, it's like an oil tanker, it doesn't cannot move around so fast. So maybe the boss would have, maybe after 2 years he observes something, we can use it as a sort of reflection mirror and make changes a little bit easier inside. The second reason is, of course, the banks have a terrible reputation with the general public. And the guy who was leading the bank thought, well, maybe through this book, I can show we have nothing to hide. So come, there are no limits of what you can see, even confidential information. Feel free, and we have nothing to hide. This is a strong signal to the general public that maybe they are not such big books as everybody thinks they are. So,
and did they pay you to do this?
Yeah, that's another classic one. I can tell you long stories about how many times this was asked to me in sort of all sorts of direct and indirect ways. But no, I haven't been paid by Rabo. I decided to pay this myself. First of all, because I can afford it, and it's much better for me because I can. Nobody will say, he's writing this or that because he's paid by Rabo.
Marcel, what was your third reason? You said there was 3 reasons they hired you, or they wanted you to have access.
Yes. So the first reason is
Free consultant.
Free consultant. The second reason is that
Nothing to hide. They have nothing to hide.
Yeah, they have nothing to hide. The third reason is that they hope and they are sufficiently confident that if somebody with proper intentions, i.e. no journalist, but somebody with proper intentions see what's going on at the bank and writes about it, that the outcome of this will not be so bad for them. And so the second reason was more a general transparency thing, we are transparent. And the third one is more substance-based. They were not afraid that what I would write would be bad for them. And maybe, I don't know what they think about it now, but I still think they're okay. I mean, there are some things that I write quite critically about that maybe they don't love about these things too hard, but in general, I think they have the impression that they got a fair deal. And that they are not, that's not that bad.
And were people like collaborating with you, or were they kind of very reticent to share information when you were interviewing them?
I was quite surprised. My first interview, and it was very frustrating, because I thought, okay, first I'm going to interview a guy who I already know at the Rabobank, because he used to be a colleague of my wife, and he's even been at my house. It was 20 years ago, so it's not a close person at all, but at least it was somebody I knew. He was an economist, and I'm an econometrician by training, so I thought, okay, let's start easy. Now, this was really, at hindsight, the most useless interview I had in 2 years. This guy was just talking shit, and thought that, and I was really a bit nervous afterwards, because I thought, well, if all the interviews go like this, I don't have a book. Because, I mean, I'm not going to write a book in which it is stated how great Rabo thinks itself. It's not, nobody wants to read this. And also, it's not true. So, so what's the point? So I was stuck there. But after that, I was shocked that how open they were actually. And apparently it's the case that since it's also new for them, I mean, most of the people I talk to never talk to people on a confidential level, knowing that that it's going to be published, and their boss think it's completely okay. Yeah. So Wiebe Draaier, who is the boss of Rabobank, sent an email to the whole bank and said, okay, this guy we can trust, he is going to do this book, I find this book important, please cooperate with this guy. And I saw this email, and sometimes it helps, because then they said, oh, who is this guy? And I showed them the email, oh, okay, good, fine. And then they said all sorts of things. And also the second reason why I had the impression that they were very open, is I created a sort of safe environment for them. And the safe environment was not created only by the fact that their boss said it was okay, because okay, that helps, of course. But my question was not very hostile, because it was very open, descriptive question. So for an anthropologist, must be normal. But I just asked, okay, tell me what has changed. And because that's what I want to know. I want to know in what sense has this bank changed since the crisis. Tell me, in your personal life, in your incentives, in the culture, in the communication, in how you treat your colleagues, how you treat your clients, how you deal with the regulators. What has changed? Just tell me. Now, nobody thinks that this is an aggressive question, which they can just tell me what has changed, and a lot has changed. So, my friends, if you think nothing has changed, well, this is clearly wrong. You may have a different opinion if everything is better, which is not the case either. Some things are better, other things are not better. But the idea that nothing has changed since the crisis is an illusion. There are enormous changes in this world, much more than, for instance, in healthcare. In healthcare, a lot of things change too, but much less than in the banking.
So, about your methodology, did you just ask questions, or did you do anything else?
Basically, yes. So it's a bit strange for, I'm an econometrician, I'd already told you. But if you want to have an answer to the question, what has changed in the bank, the tools that are available for normal econometricians won't give you that answer. And so you can torture the data as long as you like, but they won't tell you what has changed. Or you can use other tools which econometricians typically use. So I decided, okay, let's try to play an amateur anthropologist, because that has a much higher probability of giving me the answers. And of course, I cannot hide from the fact that I'm also a trained econometrician. So sometimes it helps because, I mean, as an econometrician, you are trained in logical thinking and drawing the right type of conclusions, and not, for instance, on the basis of, for instance, when you talk to people that are allocated to you one way or the other, now I'm going to talk about methodology, there will also be a few slides about that. You cannot claim that these people are representative for anything, because they are not. I mean, even if you selected them randomly, I mean, that's not possible, because then you have to control them in a control group. It's not going to work. So forget about representative, and also forget about reproducibility. Both of them are very important scientific standards. Now you simply forget about it. Now, of course, I know that I can forget about it, so I don't suggest in my drawing conclusions that on the basis of individual interviews, that this is representative for anything, or that you can replicate this and then we'll... so you have to work around with this. For instance, if I observe something which is very good, right, which happened, I'm not going to conclude, the bank does a very good job on this. I said, I want to understand why is this good, and why has this changed since then, and then treat it and say, there are instances where they got it right. I'm not saying that they get it right, because I only observe they got it right with this person. And I try to understand why do they get it right here, and why did they got it wrong yesterday. This already creates insights without overclaiming that they got it right. Okay? So this is how you treat methodology. Can you please can I use the slides? Okay, so we'll do this. Okay, we can speak this. Okay, now first of all, and this must be a good news for the anthropologist.
Wait 1 second, Marcel.
Yeah, you're going to dislodge me.
I'm just gonna, just put this in the pocket.
Yeah.
And you can walk around. Shall I do the slides for you?
Yeah, you can do it. Now, this is I quite like this one. And if you're at Amsterdam University College, you're of course familiar with the different parts of the scientific ladder. And the mathematicians somehow are always on top. They think that they own the world, that they are the true scientists. They are the true scientists. And then sort of it goes to the left, and the physicist, okay, it's just applied physics, and it's nice to be on top. And then biology is applied chemistry. The biologists think that psychology is applied biology. I don't know where the economists are, probably somewhere in the left. But the funny thing is then the whole left is the sociologist, but the anthropologists are even way back to the left in this slide. I don't think that this is a fair representation of what science is about. And there are even scientists who say that all science is either physics or STEM connecting. Next slide, please. And the problem is that science is a method for designing and testing ideas. Now, what if traditional methods fail to generate useful ideas? Now, I spend quite a bit of time on methodology because I think it's interesting. So, I'm an economist who works a lot with non-economists, and that also is nice because it shows you also the weaknesses of economists. Sometimes it's easier for me to understand for economists who do this all the time and they don't talk to other people. They're happy where they are. Now, economists often use models. There's nothing against using models in mathematics. They use mathematics. There's nothing against using mathematics. But that's sort of their safe world. And there are a lot of instances where this safe world is fine. Because, well, it's tested and tested again, and it yields answers as long as you understand what the limitations of this method are, it's fine. The problem is that they are so happy with their safe world that they also use the methodology in instances where I know already, even without looking at the results, that this methodology is not suitable. Now, and the famous joke about economists is that they look for the wallet under the light. And so the economist loses their wallet in the dark, and instead of looking where the wallet is, which is the highest probability of where the wallet is, they look on the light because it's convenient, because there at least they can see it. It's not that the probability that they actually find it will be enhanced by the fact that they look under the light. It's very typical for economists. They always look under the light, and it's fine as long as you're in a world where the wallet is more or less close to the light, and it's convenient that there's light. Now, if I know, and in the Rabo case, I know that the wallet is certainly not under the light. I mean, so if I look at the light, I know for sure I'm not going to find it. Now that's why since I'm interested in answers and not in science or in economics, I use other methods which have a higher probability of finding my wallet. Next slide, please. Now, if you want to know, well, I've already said this. If you want to know about culture and behavior of the bank, you have to talk to these guys. Next. Now, I've already explained this. So that's the way that I treat these interviews is I try to put them in a broader context without overdoing the results of the interviews themselves. And you can also cross-test. So if somebody gives you a picture which you think, well, maybe this is, I want to check whether this is actually true or whether this is an individual opinion of some person. You talk to somebody else. I also use outside experts. I have a team, because I'm not even a banking expert. So I'm married to somebody who knows more about banks than myself. So I mean, it's a bit strange. So I have a team of 8 people, all of them outstanding banking experts on different fields. And so I use them as sort of cross-check. Okay, if I want something, for instance, there's a derivative scandal. It's one of the scandals that Rabo has been involved in. And I had some guy who was in the derivative committee. So he is an absolute total expert on derivatives. So anything I write about that, I show him and say, does it make sense? So in this way, you can work around with both using anthropological methods, but at the same time testing it and checking it and making sure that you don't draw the wrong conclusions from it. Sometimes you have to be modest, and sometimes you can be a little bit more ambitious if you are convinced that you're right. It's not science. I don't call it science. It's a book written for the general public. It's not written for peer-reviewed journals. I am not a proper anthropologist. I mean, Roy is a proper anthropologist. I'm just an amateur. But I use the method because I think they suit me. Okay, it's already done. Okay, now we are going to change to the substance of the book. And so the first question is, what has changed? Now, on the first slide, I limit myself to the things that work better than 10 years ago. The more critical points follow afterwards. But what has changed is quite a lot. And this is not a limitative list. It's not a full list. I mean, first of all, the top of a bank, if you look at the top of any bank in Europe, any bank, not Rabobank only, ABN AMRO, ING in the Netherlands, or any other bank, you will typically find white old males. Females, no, 0, maybe sometimes 1 is excuses, as we say in the Netherlands. But young people, no. There are at least 50 plus. 50 plus. Non-white people, forget it. There are no. There are 0 in the banking group. So that has changed. In Rabobank, they have a management team of 10 people. 4 are women. 2 of these women are quite young. And of the males, there are at least 3 who are certainly below 50. Some, I think there's even one below 40, which is very unusual. So it creates a different culture, and I've been at these management meetings, and I'm a personal strong believer of mixed teams, mixed both in terms of gender and also in terms of other personalities, maybe race. The mixed teams are, in my view, and there is also quite some evidence about this, perform better because they can they don't go into this bubble in which everybody is similar. Now, ethical issues, I can talk forever about this. I was quite surprised that they had an ethical committee at Rabobank, which is headed by the chairman of the Rabobank himself. I was there at one of their meetings, and it's very interesting to see, not that they are behaving very ethically, that's not the point that I want to make, but they have a lot of ethical dilemmas. You have to realize that a bank has to finance entrepreneurship, right? That's one of the purposes of a bank. Now, where do they draw the line? In sectors like red light district, in sectors like soft drugs, weapons, tobacco, animal welfare, sustainability. So there are a lot of these topics where it's obvious that they cannot do everything, because then that would be too close to criminal activities or to things that you really don't want, like weapon stuff. But where to draw the line is extremely difficult for a bank. Of course they don't want to be involved. For instance, take tobacco. You think now that should be an easy case. As a bank, you don't want to do tobacco because it kills people, it's very bad for you, and so no, we're going to stop doing tobacco. So every bank says, are you a tobacco producer and asks for money for the bank? Forget it, you won't get it. You won't get it. You think, oh, that's an easy case, right? No ethical dilemma, I don't do it. Well, it means, if they are strict in this, that Albert Heijn, it cannot be a client of the Rabobank, because you can buy cigarettes in Albert Heijn. So this line, they cannot draw the line there. So where do they draw the line? It's complicated. They have good intentions. I am convinced of that. The people who work there are not crooks; they are humans. but many times good intentions do not lead to good actions. And it's interesting to understand why this is the case. Actually, one of the, in my view, one of the more interesting conclusions. Now, there have been many scandals associated with Rabo. I don't see a big scandal coming up, not with this direction, with this management. I would be really shocked if there's a scandal of the same magnitude as the ING scandal this year or any other scandal that Rabo itself was involved. And this management let that go by, I would be shocked. I think that then I have failed to see that. But smaller scandals, oh yes, they will be there. And they're not, they cannot be avoided. But not big ones. That's fine. Okay, now, the major two interesting, one of the most interesting conclusion is best explained by two concrete stories. The guy on the right, his name is Tom Borgos, and he is was the chief risk officer of the Rabobank in Tanzania. And I traveled a full week with him to lots of different clients. And why is it interesting to tell this? I realized during my travels with Tom, and we've been everywhere, it was very, very, very tight schedule, lots of different things. And certainly in a country like Tanzania, you get to learn a guy quite well if you are together for a full week there with lots of strange things happening. And I realized after this week, this guy is really an ideal banker. And why? Because he was very tight on finance. He was very, if it's a client and he gives you a bullshit story, I'm not going to finance this guy. So he was very strict, but he was also very human. So he took time to clients which were not very important financial clients for the Rabobank, who were small MKB, so a medium-sized firm in the outskirts of Dar es Salaam. He would spend as much time with them, and he would be as patient with them as he would be with a millionaire. Of course, the deal was different. So he was both, and what he also did very well, he actually takes decisions on the basis of his heart and his experience. He's an experienced guy, he's 62 years old. So he would talk to you, you are his client, and he said, okay, what's your business, what's your track record, what's your cash flow, and then he talks to you for an hour, and he has a social talk, and he says, okay, I'm going to finance you. And then back home, he has to explain, because sometimes it's not according to the rules. He said, oh, but these rules are stupid. Sometimes these rules are good. I said, I have nothing against the rules. These rules are based on averages. So on average, it's a fine rule. I have nothing against it. But I have a good story here why you, who may not fit in this rule, are still a trustworthy client. Because you have a good story, I believe in your story, I'm going to buy. And he also had a very good track record. And if he didn't this, actually, these people would be loyal to him, because they realized that he has to stick his head, and then he would get it back. So I thought, okay, it's nice to actually see a banker who does a good job. And then I told him, so what are you going to do now? Because his contract expired. He said, will you go back to the Netherlands? I said, no, I'm not going. I don't want to go back to the Netherlands because my type of banking doesn't work in the Netherlands. I thought, well, that's a bad signal. Because here is somebody who does everything right. And actually, he is back in the Netherlands. Although he did one. He does everything right. So you really want bankers like him. You want all bankers to be like him. And what he tells me, I cannot bank like this in the Netherlands. So apparently we collectively do something wrong. And because the optimal behavior that we expect from a banker cannot. So I said, why? Is it because the deals that I make here, they will be disallowed. It's not according to the book. Second story. Similar result. It's a tragic story. I can talk for hours. This is the family four. Family four. This is the guy. He is in a tent, and this tent was there because he was kicked out of his house by absolutely atrocious behavior by the municipality of Uithoorn. You think that these things happen in China or in some countries where they don't take human rights very seriously? Well, it happens in the Netherlands too. Don't make an illusion. Don't think that the government is always your friend. Sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. In this particular case, they were not. They did really horrible things, such that these people's house was basically fell apart. And legally, these people couldn't do anything against it. First of all, it's very hard to win law cases against the government, but the government had a trick, and they couldn't do anything about it. So these people were basically, from one day to the other, normal, nice people. They did nothing wrong in their life. And from one day to the other, these people were bankrupt. They had a €100,000 debt because they couldn't pay their mortgages anymore. Their house was worth nothing anyway. It just basically fell apart. So what do you do? So the bank decided to help them. The bank initially, the person, same as the poor folks, this was a good person. And because she thought, okay, these people did nothing wrong in their life, they are the victims of dubious actions by others. I, as a bank, I'm not going to punish them again by enforcing the rules to the letter, because that would not be a very human way of banking. For the bank, I mean, these were small houses. I mean, €100,000 for the bank isn't. I mean, it's not that they give this away because they still have. But they don't want to push it to the limit. For instance, they could charge them a certain percentage of interest rate, and it would mean that these people were longer years had to suffer from an absolute subsistence level. But why is it still a bad story for the bank? Although the individual banker did everything right, is that the strange rules in this country are that when you are in a situation like these people, you cannot have your own company. Certainly, if it's a risky company, so you have to kill the company because they think it's too risky. Because they want you to be a teacher or something which has a salary, because then you can. But the problem was, on a human level, the company of this person was the only thing that kept them alive. The woman of the house was already fell apart. She had mental problems, physical problems as a result of all the actions. And the company that this guy started was their only life. And the banker realized, yes, these people should be allowed to keep this company, because that's not only good for these people. It's not only good. It's the only way that we can do it. But it's also good for the bank, because if these people do what they are happy with and what is their only life, the probability that they actually will pay back their debt is also high. So it was a pure win-win situation, and I can explain this to my mother and to any to a 10-year-old kid in 5 minutes. Now, what's the problem? The woman who wanted to do this, it took her crazy. She had to do crazy things inside the bank to realize this, because she had to convince her boss. She had to convince the boss of her boss. Then she had to convince the head office in Utrecht. And then there was another thing. And so, and at the end, somebody fell asleep at the Rabobank and threatened to cancel this whole deal. And I had to interfere. Now, of course, it's not proper behavior by anthropologists to interfere in the subject that you study. You look frowning. You think it's proper? Well, I think I would not do it normally. But in this case, I could not do it, because these people would have been suffering. So I did it because I thought, okay, I'm helping these people for once, it's okay, I can explain it, I write it down, and then people understand that I did it. But of course, it's terrible that I had to do it. And because suppose that I was not there, maybe the ending would have been worse for these people, and they would have suffered very badly. Now, this is a big conclusion, because what's happening in the banking land is you have a banker here, and he can push on this button. It's a bad button. It's a bad button. It's bad for the client. It's even not obvious that it's good for the bank themselves. It may even be bad for the long-term interest of the bank, right? It's a button. Then I can also push on this button. It's a good button. It's good for the client, also good for the long-term interest of the bank. What happened in the banking land is that if I push on this button, the bad one, nobody will ask questions. Because coincidentally, the bad button is according to the books. It's according to the rules. Yeah? So my boss is not going to say, you have followed the rules, you are a bad banker. Yeah? Okay, you followed the rules, fine. Because he doesn't know the context of the client, so he only sees, he pushes the button, he follows the rules, good banker. Right? If I push on this button, I have to spend 3, 4, 5 times more time and effort, and all sorts of people will tell me that I've done the wrong things because it's not according to the rules. But this is a good button. So what's happening is, if you are stressed or you have a challenging job, which most people have, and I can push on this button and nobody will ask a question. It takes me 5 seconds. Or I can push on this button and I have to spend a whole week explaining to lots of people who thinks that I'm a bad person, that I do this. And okay, at the end, if I'm intrinsically motivated, I can still do that. And I can tell them, okay, I have spent this week. But I have spent this week and I explained to everybody that this was the right thing to do. But you make it very hard to push on this button. Much easier to push on this button. If you only have a day, and you know that this will take you 5 days, this will take a half day, that's bad. But this happens all the time. And this is not only the fault of the bank, because some of these rules are imposed by regulators who enforce the rules by the letter instead of by the spirit of the law. Now the laws are written, there are general laws, and they are not written to apply in each specific context. Some of them are. There are minimum standards of human rights. Okay, it's good that they are there and they should be enforced by the letter. But many rules and regulations are based on averages and do not take into account the context, in which the context may show you that these averages are not very important, that in this particular context, like for me before, it was obvious that this rule was stupid for them. Completely obvious. Why, if it's obvious for everybody, do they make life so hard? And even the amount, it's not 10 million. It was 100,000, and it is not 100,000 lost. I mean, it was the interest of 100,000 what you're talking about. It's ridiculous. Next slide. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of the book. It's a bit strange to end with this almost, but I am doing it anyway. I'm not going to go over this because it will take too much time. But you have an idea what I've done. So I've looked at the local banks. And the local banks, they used to have their own license, and now they're centralized. And I wanted to know whether this is good news or bad news for them. And of course, the verdict is mixed. And what's also very strange about these local banks, and probably you don't realize this, I didn't realize it when I started this book, is when you go to a local Rabobank, these buildings are huge, but empty. They're not fully empty, but it's clear that they are built for a different world. Because we bank with our watches, with our telephones and with our laptops. And these buildings were built at the time when people actually would go to banks to collect their money and to do all sorts of things. and we don't do that anymore. And that's not bad. It's not the bank's fault. That's a reality that we are in today, and it means that they have to lay off staff, and that they're stuck with buildings which are half empty. It's a strange feeling. So I wanted also to know how do they deal with that. Chapter 3, Utrecht Centraal, a little bit of a joke, of course, but that's where the head office is, and I wanted to know what they're doing in the head office. It turns out that they use very funny jargon, for instance. I don't know, do you guys, your generation typically don't read newspapers anymore, I think, but at least somebody told me. Is there somebody who reads the NRC Handelsblad? Yeah, you do. Do you know Japke D. Bouwman? She's written 2 articles about my book. One of them about the chapter of Utrecht Centraal, because they use funny jargon, and I wrote a fairy tale about this. And so Japke D. has written this. And then the next week she interviewed Wiebe Draaier about this. So why are you using this strange language all the time? It's very funny. Now, chapter 4 is Rabo Spread Your Wings. I wrote about Australia, point Mike, and about Tanzania and Hong Kong. Because Rabobank is a very important bank for food and agri in the world. We don't know that because we think that it's just a bank in the Netherlands. But actually, for every euro, they make 3 euros here, and they make already 1 euro abroad. And this, of course, this will change. Their foreign activities will become much more important in the future. The 5th chapter is when you're in trouble. I call it when you're in trouble. In Dutch, it's bijzonder beheer. That's the default unit. That's the unit where you come when you're in trouble. And so you cannot pay back your mortgages anymore, or your company is in trouble. And this unit pops in. Of course, there's a section on the scandal, and there's a section on the chapter on the ethical dilemmas and sustainability. And then there's the conclusions. On the conclusions, there are 5. I'm not going to talk too much about 3 of them. I already talked quite a bit about 1 of them, and I'm not sure how I'm doing in time. Okay, good. Then I will talk about SMORC because that's very interesting. The other 3, forget about that. You can read the book and then see what's in there. SMORC is a term which comes from the behavioral economist Dan Ariely. It's not something that I invented. And SMORC stands for a small model of rational crime. And it's actually very, very, very interesting. You have to read the book by Dan Ariely, which is called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. And it shows under what circumstances people cheat. And when I say cheat, I don't mean outrageous lies like Trump or Baudet or whatever these clowns, they lie the whole day. I'm not talking about those cheats. I talk about little everyday cheats like we all do. And it turns out that 5% of the people are like pathological liars. 5% of the people never lie. And most of us lie, sometimes convenient lies, and sometimes a little bit cheap. Now, why is it important for banks? Because there's a famous experiment in the book by Ariely in which he lets students answer a number of questions, simple questions, and then they have to self-report how many they got it right. And it turns out that 90% of the people cheat a little bit. And why is this the case? And they think, okay, I have 25 right, and they have 24. And the reason is you don't want to look in the mirror and see yourself as a cheater. So if you only cheat one, you say, well, I knew this question. You know, I mean, I made a typo or a slip of the pen, or I made a calculation error. So you're mini cheating yourself, but you are not an outrageous liar. Okay? Fine. This is a hard experimental result that's been replicated many times. Now, why is it important? Because there is a second experiment which is exactly the same as the first experiment with one difference. These students get not paid in money, but they get paid in fiches, like monopoly money or whatever, fiches, chips. And then it's told by the instructor, you can convert these chips into real money next door. It's the same money. Yesterday it was real money, dollars. Now it's chips, but it's the same dollars if I cash it next door. Now what happens? They cheat much more. More people cheat, and they cheat more. Why? It's chips. It's not money. Now why is it important for this book, and why is it important for the bank? Because of the digitalization, bankers don't see clients anymore. So they will behave like the chip people. Because it's not humans that they face, it's spreadsheets. Now if I cheat a spreadsheet, it's not real cheating, it's only a computer. This is a big risk in the society that we live in, with Facebook and with digitalized banks, and you have it, that people are treating them not as real money or as real people. And accordingly, they cheat more. Not because they're bad people, but they are people. Not because they're pathological trumps, because they're people, and people behave in this way. And this has been tested and tested again, and this is what to do. Now, fortunately, you can do something about it. You can do something about smart. You can invent tricks. Behavioral economics is about inventing those tricks and identifying where is the highest risk and do something about it. I will give you one trivial example and then I stop. A trivial example is this. There's a pension fund in the Netherlands, and there are guys who are making investment decisions for these pension funds. So they are huge, huge, huge money. Pension funds are incredibly well funded and very, very rich. And they have to make decisions which have huge implications for many people, pensioners. And so what they do is whenever they push on a button in which they really make a transaction of big impact, a face of a pensioner is shown in their page. Either with photographs, a wall, or the software device, which does it. It sounds like a really easy and trivial trick, but it's been tested and this works. And because it shows them it's not a spreadsheet, this is a human. So don't treat it as a spreadsheet because it's a human. Now, in the banks, you can also do a lot of these things. Artificial things, maybe. It feels like a trick, but it works. And it reduces the probability that you suffer from smart. And it's an important conclusion. And it's one of the few conclusions that the bank doesn't recognize. At least not to the extent. So I told them, look, this is a problem. And I'm shocked that they don't recognize it, because this is one of the easiest curable problems. It doesn't cost a lot of money to solve this. I mean, you have to have a guy who does smart behavioral economics, and these tricks are not, I mean, a software showing a face of a pension, it's not something that costs you millions of dollars, euros. It also shows to society that you actually care about these things, you take it seriously, and that you act upon it. But the bedrijf said, well, no, this behavioral risk officer is not needed. I can do that myself. Well, I think he is wrong. I think I should stop because I can talk until 12 o'clock about this, but that's not a good idea. All right, thanks a lot. Of course, happy to still answer questions, either informally or formally.
Are there some questions now from Marcel?
Have you contacted the ING afterwards?
Afterwards?
Yeah.
No, but rumor goes that they are jealous.
Yeah.
Rumor goes that they're jealous. The Rabo people have told me that their colleagues at ING, and I think, wow, we should have done that. And I asked them, but they didn't want to do it. So, I mean,
That becomes the second project. That becomes the second project then.
Well, I'm not sure what my next project will be. I never know this. I don't plan these things. I believe in serendipity. So something should happen, and maybe it's this, and maybe it's something else. not sure. Other questions?
I have one question.
Yeah.
I read the book of Joris Luijendijk.
Ah,
And
the famous one.
yeah,
The question,
So-
I mean. Yeah.
but in the NRC article about your book, it says that he cited that people are bankers are amoral and so on. But at least what I got from the book was something else, which was that maybe these bankers are immoral, but what is fundamentally flawed, according to him, is the system. So there's kind of reverse feedbacks in the system, which make that people who want to kind of act according to the rules in the end up doing horrible things. And you mentioned a little bit of that in your by saying, well, it's like difficult to push the right button.
Mm-hmm.
So do you then agree with that statement that there are some kind of perverse systems in place that still need changing?
And the problem with Luijendijk is he makes three mistakes. First of all, he's overdoing it. So what he's done, he has interviewed people in a certain sector of the bank, namely the city. And not only the city, but the investment banks in the city. Now, these are the most aggressive, horrible institutes like the Goldman Sachs, and you cannot. And then he draws conclusions, and he draws conclusions on all the banks, of which he knows nothing because he hasn't spoken to them. So I think this is the first mistake, is that he draws conclusions which you cannot draw from the data or the information that he has acquired. The second thing is that he makes extreme statements, like people are immoral. That's a very strong statement to make.
Amoral.
Amoral. Or no, sometimes they use amoral, sometimes immoral. What does he mean? That people can do right or wrong things depending on the system? Well, if he means that, but in interviews he goes much further than that. There are proofs that then I would agree. And I would even think that the Rabobank people they want to do good things. But they don't succeed, and here we have a common ground. There are perverse incentives in the system. The only thing is, they are not as perverse as they were 10 years ago. So, well, is this good news or bad news? Well, that depends on whether you believe in half empty or half full glasses. I would say it's better than they were, but it's certainly not right. And so, in that sense, and I would like to have a debate with Luijendijk or with Rutger Bregman, who is in the court. But he writes in the Guardian, Rutger Bregman, the banks do not create any welfare in the economy. They only subtract welfare. It's absolutely outrageous statement of which there is zero evidence. I'm happy to discuss with these guys, and because I think the good points that they want to make, they are lost on me if you cover it in language which is outrageous, flawed statements. I am too scientific for that. I don't want to hear outrageous statements and then think, oh yes, but a tenth of this statement may be true. Why do you do that? It's not my style. What do you want to ask a question on?
I think I have a few questions. I wrote down for the last one. One of these is, you always have an amateurish anthropologist.
No, not amateurish. That would be amateur. That's right.
Okay,
yeah.
But I wonder why. Because you've done ethnography. It's very good.
Mm-hmm.
And ethnography is not it's not owned by anthropologists.
No,
So
that's true.
And there's a lot of organizational ethnography which you can easily connect.
Well, the reason why I'm not known for my modesty. So I thought, let's try to be modest for once and not claim to be an anthropologist, which I'm not. And I cannot claim to have knowledge on how anthropologists do their work. So I improvise. And so that's why I think it's fair to call me an amateur. Maybe if anthropologists think that this is what they should do, fine, and I'm a good amateur. Then I'm a good amateur.
I think this is precisely.
I'm happy to hear that. But I didn't know that, for instance. But I just did what I thought sounded So I didn't study anthropology and then decided this is the thing to do. I just did it because I thought this sounds like a good idea.
And there have been more anthropologists studying banks.
Yes. Yeah, I have read one of them. Funny difference between the book, it's a Swiss book, and mine is that in the Swiss book everything is anonymous, and in my book everybody in my book is on is with their names in the book. They all agree. It's unusual, which makes it much more fun, of course, because you read about Bank X where people Y behave in a certain way. That's the only reason. That's the only way in which he was allowed in that bank. But of course, much more fun. Like I said, this is the Rabobank, and this is Mr. X. This is not Mr. X. This is Mr. Wasutin Khodkaew. Who doesn't work for Rabobank? Well, okay. I happen to know his name. All right. Sorry, there was another thing.
Yeah, you acted as a fly on the wall, you said. But
More or less, yeah.
but then you, well, I don't think you did.
No.
Because these also debates in endography and anthropology, can people be fly on the wall? You know, there are very many models in there. So
Sure.
I think it would be good to look at that. But then, you have this wonderful example of the family folk.
Yes, it's my favorite example.
You press the button.
Yes.
And you said, you come with this idea of the system, and then actually your explanation model, I think, goes in terms of the bureaucracy. But you could also, yeah, but there's also power involved. Because you only have to make one phone call.
Absolutely. No, one email actually.
Oh, and
And
then,
it was solved in 10 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there is that. I mean, yeah, of course, because they realized that they couldn't afford not to solve it. And anyway, the case was clear cut. Anyway, it was not. I mean, on substance, this was not a
Yeah, okay,
controversial
but
call.
wasn't it a woman who tried to solve that?
That's right.
And then I think there were 200 phone calls.
Yes, she made 200 phone calls for these people. More than 200 phone calls.
And you sent one email. So there is more going on. I think.
Well, let's get this straight. She didn't make 200 phone calls to do what I did. But she needed to make these phone calls because she needed, that was before the solution. Because first of all, she phoned the municipality. What is going on here? Can you not be more reasonable to these people? Then there were neighbors who were in a similar situation. There were lawyers involved. There were real estate agents involved. And so she made all these phone calls because these people were in a very bad state. And so she made all these phone calls. And then she decided, this is it. I'm going to do this. This she decided. And then she had trouble in selling this, what she thought was the decent thing to do, internally to her colleagues. Her boss was fine. The boss of her boss was fine.
Okay.
But then other people started to treat her badly. And at some stage, I was involved. So, of course, a power game. I knew absolutely sure if I push on this button, these people will be, and these people are very happy with me.